Welcome everyone to our study. Presently we're studying the Sacred Outlook, the practice of Vajrayana. So kindly recognizing how the study that we're doing here addresses the universal issue of suffering all across what we call samsara, including countless sentient beings, and understanding that the study that we're undertaking here is about invoking the wisdom that's not subject to this confusion. And we invoke this wisdom in the form of Vajrayana. This wisdom, of course, is not something that's tangible, objectifiable, and graspable. It's the very absence of our dualistic confusion. And yet, because of our habitual patterns, then there is the requirement of the path. And our path then should be informed by this inspiration really to eliminate confusion in order to establish all beings at the level of perfect freedom and enlightenment. So that's what we call preparing with bodhicitta. So we'll begin with the section from Journey Without Goal, which is the crying to the teachers from afar. Actually, before we go into that, I'd like to somebody just reminded me that today is the anniversary of a very great sage who's very important for us in our present journey, and this is somebody called Jakob Rinpoche. Jakob Rinpoche is very important because he's someone who clarified the Buddhist teaching, particularly the Nyingma teaching, at a time when there was a lot of confusion and a lot of, you could say, squabbling between the traditions and not particularly clear understanding of some of the aspects of the teaching of the Great Perfection and the teachings of the Nyingma tradition. And also, Mipa Rinpoche's teaching really enabled us to overcome a lot of the misunderstandings around the really a central theme in Buddhism, which is what we can call the middle way critique, which is the Buddha's teaching on how there's nothing that we can actually grasp, and yet that understanding of what we call shunyata or emptiness is in no way a nihilist position of saying there's nothing. It is the elimination of confusion that enables us to uncover a natural disposition of enlightenment that's innate to all of us, which we call Buddha nature. And so sometimes in the context of the teaching, there's been some teachers who would emphasize this luminous quality of Buddha nature. Others would emphasize the absence of inherent existence in phenomena. And so we end up with sometimes having some squabbling philosophically. And Mipa Rinpoche was very important in really identifying how these two views, one that understands the lack of the inherent existence of anything, shunyata, is in no way different from the understanding of Buddha nature. And so I'm indebted to Woolston Fletcher, who just in a recent talk I was listening to, really brings out this very important point that Mipa Rinpoche and also others like Longchen Rabjam, they speak about understanding what we call the unity, understanding the unity of what we call second turning of the wheel and the third turning of the wheel, the understanding the unity of emptiness and Buddha nature. When we understand that, then both the teachings on emptiness can be understood as absolute teachings, and the teachings on Buddha nature can be understood as absolute teachings. Otherwise, if we see them as separate, then both of these teachings remain relative, or what we call expedient teaching. This might sound a little bit academic, but it's quite important, particularly for practitioners, to really have that kind of certainty when they engage in the path. And so Mipa Rinpoche really was extraordinarily important, and he was a very close student of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, and it was Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo who actually asked Mipa Rinpoche to write and clarify the Buddha's teaching. Of course, there was many already existing teachings, but particularly Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo asked Mipa Rinpoche to clarify the Nyingma teachings, where very often the sutra teachings, or you could say the dialectic teachings of the sutras, was not that well studied. So he's quite significant in that regard. And our teachers, my teacher, Dilgu Khyentse Rinpoche, actually was blessed by Mipa Rinpoche already when he was in his mother's womb. And Mipa Rinpoche named Kyabje Dilgu Khyentse Rinpoche, giving him the name Tashi Paljo. And also later, after Rinpoche was born, he received from Mipa Rinpoche the particular Manjushri blessing that he always referred to as being very significant. Mipa Rinpoche's students include then also the 10th Trungpa Tuku, and particularly if we look at another, the 11th Trungpa Tuku, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, whose text we're studying here, if we look at the writings of his teacher, Khenpo Gangsha, he repeatedly refers to Jamgon Mipa Rinpoche's teachings. And presently, actually, both in the Nyingma and Kagyu traditions, Mipa Rinpoche's teachings are studied very widely. So he's very significant. And so much of the teachings that we're studying here really are underpinned by the teachings that come down from Mipa Rinpoche. So I'm indebted to someone who informed me that today is his anniversary. And yeah, so I'm going to be Mipa Rinpoche. So here in the text by Jamgon Kongtrul, who incidentally also was a teacher of Mipa Rinpoche, it says, because of my former evil actions, I was born at the end of the dark age. All that I have previously done has caused me suffering. Because of evil friends, I'm darkened by the shadow of evil deeds. My Dharma practice has been sidetracked by my meaningless chatter. Guru, think of me. Look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that I completely accomplish the holy Dharma. So we are presently in what we could call a dark age. There's a lot of confusion, like Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he says, writes in the Sadhana Mahamudra, materialism has burst its banks. And this doesn't just mean that everybody's keen to have a big TV, a big car, and a lot of material objects. Materialism is this belief that there's nothing but just stuff, there's nothing but just matter, and that everything that there is just what we have in terms of material, inanimate objects, phenomena that are, you could say, void of consciousness, and even consciousness is understood as material phenomena. And we even have what we call materialists that would say there is no such a thing as consciousness. It's just a playing out of neurons and so forth. So we do have, with all regards to that science, which is very helpful to us, we do live at a time where there's a profound ignorance around the key thing that really rules our entire existence, which is consciousness or our mind. And without any real understanding of how mind can go astray into delusion, what we consider samsara, refer to as samsara, and how mind innately possesses a purity of enlightenment, and that is what we refer to as nirvana. So we live at a time where there's an incredible ignorance around this key dimension of our being. So this is a difficult time to be born. At the same time, we again and again hear that even though we're born in the dark age, we would say at this dark age, then the profound teachings like the Vajrayana are particularly powerful. And this is also a time of great opportunity. So we should rejoice in that we have the Vajrayana teachings. But we need to recognize humbly that what we've been doing so far, as much as we like to talk about all sorts of interesting things that we've done, actually hasn't led to anything except just furthering our suffering. We're still caught up in a cycle of unconstructive action. And we're also surrounded by, this is not people that are evil per se, but just due to the ignorance of our culture, the times, our civilization, so forth, we have deeply confused associates, friends, family, and so on. And so we're immersed in this this place of confusion. So this is where we very often are sidetracked. We might have every good intention to be practicing the Dharma, and yet we get distracted by pointless considerations, pointless reflections, pointless discussions, and so forth. So recognizing the truth of what Kongtrul Rinpoche is saying here, then we supplicate from the bottom of our heart, Guru, think of me, look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that I accomplish the holy Dharma, that we manage to do what really has meaning, really what is worthwhile. So then we'll go to the teaching, studying. Okay, here we are. By the way, all of you, apologies for I let the subscription to the webinar expire. So thank you all or rather apologies for the sort of last minute registration link that I had to create yesterday, and there seems to be a lot of you who are here nevertheless. So apologies about that. So having received the complete Abhishek of the vase, so we've looked at how the actual engagement of enlightenment as per the Vajrayana path, where we engage this nature, this Buddha nature that is innately ours and which is which we are encouraged to embrace by the teacher. And we looked at how the Nundro has a role in terms of us being able to gauge and be sensitized to this nature, be able to understand this nature, create a relationship with this nature. We then are receiving the empowerment, the encouragement from the teacher, an actual empowerment in how to embrace this and how to actually make this yoga, how to engage this yoga of Vajrayana. And so we receive this anointment of this empowerment to actually fully recognize that this is what we truly are, and this is what we need to integrate, to realize. So we receive Abhisheka as something that acknowledges what we truly are. And so we looked at we're looking at 4 aspects really of Abhisheka. And in the context of the first one, the Abhisheka of the vase, then there were these various the five Abhishekas. And now Trungpa Rinpoche says, having received the complete Abhisheka of the vase, there is a sense of significant psychological progress and psychological change in the student. At that point, Vajra master is able to confirm the remaining 3 abhishekas. So when we receive the abhisheka of the vase, and when we're receiving abhisheka in general, this comes with having already been processed through the path and already having begun to change as our perceptions of ourselves have begun to change, and our engagement with our body, speech, and mind, and so forth, have begun to change. Then, particularly, then the abhisheka is one in which we are matured. There's a recognition of, there's a acknowledgement of an existing wealth within ourselves, and we would say that it's through empowerment that we mature. Something takes place. In Tibetan, we call it minche ki wang. We also talk about drelche ki chi, and then gyapten ki lung. But minche ki wang means the maturation through empowerment. We become maturer persons. We begin to be less prone to flawed logic, flawed beliefs. And at that point, then also together with the empowerment that matures us, we receive what's called the liberating instructions. Finally, we also have what's called the supporting reading transmissions. So these all are 3 things that come together when we receive empowerment. One is the empowerment itself, the other is the instructions, and then finally the reading transmissions of the texts. So something takes place, and on the basis of this first empowerment, then we have following 3, we would call this outer, the first empowerment is referred to as the outer beneficial empowerment. This really creates the foundation for our vision of the path. And then the remaining 3 abhishekas, what we call the secret abhisheka, the prajna-jhana abhisheka, and then the word abhisheka. These then work on a much more, on an even profounder level. Trungpa says, however, we cannot go into too much detail about these aspects of the ceremony, but in brief, the second abhisheka is known as the secret abhisheka, the guya abhisheka, and by drinking amrita, a mixture of liquor and other substances from the skull cup on the shrine, the mind of the student merges with the mind of the teacher and the mind of the yidam, so that the boundary between confusion and wakefulness begins to dissolve. So we have at that point a much more deeper and subtler experience of identification with the yidam, not seen as something external, the mind of the teacher not seen as external, and as such then the boundary between our own ordinary mind and the mind of the teacher, this boundary between confusion and wakefulness, begins to dissolve. In the third abhisheka, the prajna-jhana abhisheka, abhisheka of knowledge and wisdom, the student begins to experience joy, mahasukha, the uniting of the world. So that's where the student no longer is subject to the pains of subject and object, and the world begins to become a place of great bliss. It's in context of the third abhisheka that we have the references to sexual practice, and this is because we would say that is a metaphor for the bliss that actually embraces the other. So while the sexual practice is seen as something that can indicate this experience, it's not taken as something that is absolute in itself. It's simply just what we would call example wisdom. And of course, the actual objective or the point of that is understanding the unconditional bliss as it exists within non-duality. So that's also why we very often have this metaphor of the Yabiyum image, the Shiva Shakti with the male-female union, which is then in the absence of this, where self and other is no longer standing as 2 struggling entities, rather they're a unity. Subject and object is no longer 2. Then rather than being a struggle, there is bliss. So this is where this uniting with the world, or the absence of duality, is what is associated with this mahasukha, great bliss. Trungpa continues, this is sometimes called the union of bliss and emptiness, which signifies greater openness and greater vision taking place. The fourth Abhisheka, Chaturtha Abhisheka, is known as the Abhisheka of suchness. The student experiences that he or she does not have to dwell on the past, present, or future. He or she could just wake themselves up on the spot. The student's mind is opened into the ultimate notion of sacred outlook, in which there's nobody to flash sacred outlook. There is just a sense of the doer and the doing dissolving into one, which is a sense of basic shock. The possibilities of conventional mind are dissolving into nothing. So with the fourth Abhisheka, there's no longer a sense of there being the skillful means of the path and something that needs to be achieved through the path. The sense of doer and doing dissolves into one. There's a recognition, and the teacher introduces to the student this recognition of already spontaneously present, abiding wisdom, which is something that is free from the ordinary conventional mind. And as such, there's no danger or there's no threat from the ordinary dualistic mind. This conventional mind gradually is seen as simply something that just dissolves, is freed. So that's the empowerment. So we would say that empowerment really is the anointment or the introduction to the Vajrayana world. This is the first step on the way. And then we would say the samaya, once we have been anointed, then to uphold this heritage that we've been empowered to embrace, then we talk about the samaya as the life force of the empowerment. It's what keeps this alive. We could have received anointment as ruler of the realm, but we might mess it up completely. We might be royalty, but then again, we might succumb to habitual patterns, and our power of this anointment is lost. So the samaya is essential for the empowerment to actually staying with us, for the power of the empowerment to actually live with us, become a lived experience. So Trungpa says the principle of samaya, or sacred bondage, becomes extremely important once we have taken samaya. The definition of yidam as the sacred bondage of one's mind was discussed earlier. So that's where we have the personal deity in the sense of recognizing the sacred quality that's innate to us. This is something that needs to be honored. And this is then what we talked about earlier. He says, Trungpa says, when we receive empowerment to practice the sadhana of Vajrayana, we take on that samaya or bondage. We bind ourselves to indestructible wakefulness, committing ourselves fully to maintaining sacred outlook throughout our lives. This is done by identifying oneself completely with the Vajra sanity of the teacher and of Vajrayana. So binding ourselves here means to simply sustain a truthful continuity of recognition of this quality or this vipassana or this wisdom that abides unconditionally within ourselves. This is what is meant with Vajrayana, and this is what our teacher seeks to inspire us with. So the teacher's presence, the presence of Vajrayana, is something that we continually stay with. So in terms of our ordinary dualistic mind, we can talk about bondage, we can talk about binding ourselves, but it is in fact just aligning ourselves with what is innately what we truly are, the innate true nature of reality. So it says here, one is inseparably bound together with the teacher and the yidam. And at this point, one's very being and one's sanity depend on keeping up this commitment. So again, this is nothing that's imposed on us, but this is simply comes on the basis of us through having been processed on the path of actually discovering wisdom as innate to us. And at that point, then we recognize the brilliance of the teacher. We recognize the brilliance of our own mind, and understanding how this nature is innate to us. Our sanity is really contingent on us not corrupting. Once we have a vision of this sanity, to begin to sort of tag along with our habitual inclinations towards cheap thrills and just habitual projections, it would be a sad place to go once we have once we have been introduced to and encouraged, empowered to this brilliance of the innate purity that we possess. So Trungpa says that is not to say that if a student has one bad thought or trace of confusion, he will be rejected or destroyed. There is still a sense of journey and a path that takes place once one has received Abhisheka. In fact, it is said that samaya is nearly impossible to keep. It's like a mirror that, no matter how thoroughly it is polished, it always collects dust and must be polished again. In taking Abhisheka, one is taught to experience sacred outlook on the spot, which is samaya. When obstacles or difficulties arise, they become reminders of sacred outlook rather than purely hindrances. This is called the samaya of experiencing everything as sacred in Vajra nature, which has three categories: the samaya of body or mudra, the samaya of speech or mantra, and the samaya of mind or Vajra. So when we engage in this discipline, there's never a sense that the conceptions of our ordinary mind really constitute a problem. So we're going to fall into habitual patterns. We'll find ourselves whinging away about ordinary things that actually we needn't be caught up in, ignoring our sort of our innate purity and our samaya. And at the same time, also, we know that this is something that is quite transparent, and that coming back to the practice, then this is something where we find the unconditionally true. So we don't live in a struggle with our habitual impulses, but at the same time they come up, and it's very difficult to be free of getting entangled by them. So it's a bit like Atisha, who says that it was easy to keep the pratimoksha, the monastic vows. It was sometimes with the bodhisattva vows, it would be difficult to keep them, but he would repair them. But he says with the Vajrayana vows, he says that the breakages of samaya would rain on him continually. And that's, of course, just Atisha being humble in the sense of praising really the Vajrayana for its subtlety, because, of course, the Vajrayana operates with the subtle aspects of our mind. And so him being attentive to all the subtle breakages that takes place is really just an expression of humility and the need really to continually be alert to what's happening in every moment. A bit like we say, living on the razor's edge, there has to be this continual application. And that's where Trungpa says, no matter how thoroughly polished, it always collects dust and must be polished again. And so we would say the Vajrayana vows, they are continually broken, but they can be easily put back together again. It's compared to a gold container, which, while it might be damaged or whatever, it's very easy to beat it into place again. It's something that's workable. So in that place, then there's nothing which is seen as being ultimately an obstacle or something that everything is included within this experience. All aspects of our personal psychological phenomena and all aspects of the world around us is included, and there's nothing really that constitutes something that is ultimately a hindrance. So now we look at then the way that Samaya is practiced in terms of body, speech, and mind. So Trungpa says the Samaya of body involves always regarding one's basic phenomenal situation as an expression of sacredness. We do not doubt the sacredness of our world. So we see everything. We see the reality or the world we're living in, the ordinary world, as being intrinsically not ordinary. It might appear ordinary according to our, you could say, karmic projections, our habitual projections, but at the same time we know that it intrinsically possesses this purity, that it's devoid of our, it's innately devoid or free from our projections onto it. The Samaya of speech involves also regarding any occurrence, anything that comes up in our experience, in our psychology, as sacred. This could be either an internal or external occurrence, so that any subconscious gossip or emotional upheaval is included here. So that's why whatever we do, our interaction with the world, whether it's us going out towards the world or the perceptions of the world coming to us, whatever happens in our interaction with the phenomenal world and all our emotional reaction and psychological, what we could call gossip or commentary and so on, is something that's included, is also seen as something that appears, yet there's nothing tangible about it. And so this is very often where, to work with this, we have an ongoing practice of mantra. This is where we would say the first Samaya of body. This is where we perceive the phenomenal world in terms of its intrinsic actual purity as mandala, as deity. And the way that we work with subconscious gossip then is sustaining the presence of wisdom through repetition of mantra. And then Trungpa says the Samaya of mind is connected with the indestructible wakefulness of the Vajra Mandala. In this case, the Mandala Vajrayana. Even the hint or the possibility of neurosis is unable to enter into one's state of being, because the whole world is seen as part of the mandala of sacredness that one has entered. So there's a complete embracing of everything that is. This insight really is then the Samaya of mind. Trungpa says it's interesting that Abhisheka brings both a greater sense of freedom and a greater sense of bondage. The more we develop a sense of openness, of letting go and shedding ego, the more we develop a commitment to the world of sanity. This is also where we develop this sense of gratitude to the lineage. There's a sense that thanks to the lineage, thanks to these persons who are not just seen then as some extraordinary individuals, Tibetans, Bhutanese, Asians, or perhaps Western students that or gurus, who are out there, who are interesting, enormous persons in our lives. There's a sense that everything that we are is in fact the teacher. Like Tsongtse Khyentse Rinpoche says, it's not just that the guru is important in the Vajrayana, it's that the entire Vajrayana is the guru. So there's a complete unity with the guru. Again, coming back to the notion of what we mean with guru yoga, there's a complete unity, a complete commitment to this sanity that the teacher shows us. So Trungpa says taking Abhisheka and beginning Yidam practice is a very serious step. In fact, we should be somewhat frightened of it, and at the same time we could appreciate it as the most precious opportunity to realize our human birth. So this is where we want to recognize the greatness of this situation. I'll just let you sit with that for a moment or two. I'm just going to have to Just gonna have to get something. I'll be right back. Co-emergent wisdom. Fundamentally, the magic of the Vajrayana tradition is the ability to transform confusion into wisdom on the spot. From the point of view of Vajrayana, real magic, or siddhi in Sanskrit, is the ability to work with and tame one's mind. This is completely different from the usual notion of magic as a supernatural power over the universe. So again, this comes back to ourselves. This comes back to us working with our mind, and not something about us exerting, not like sort of in Marvel, what's called Marvel comics. You know, that they've all been filmed, right? Doctor Strange and so on. These kind of comic book fantasy that siddhi is something about we can start to impose our will on the phenomenal world. It's the exact opposite. It's us actually freeing ourselves from the normal confused mind with all its insecure needs. And that's where there's a freeing up that enables genuine magic. Trungpa continues, as mentioned in the previous discussion of the samayas of body, speech, and mind, any potential confusion, neurosis, becomes an opportunity to experience sacred outlook. At the beginning of the path of meditation, we work to tame our minds and subdue the forces of confusion. In the Mahayana, we see the emptiness of self and phenomena. Out of that, we rouse compassion for beings who do not realize the emptiness, and therefore the freedom of their nature. In the Vajrayana, we could actually bring together confusion and enlightenment on one spot, and thereby completely overcome the dualism of samsara and nirvana. So again, for us to approach Vajrayana, there has to be an experiential processing. We can't just be Buddhists and then have some sense of, well, I hang out with the right people, or I have the Buddhist books, or I've done my this and that. There has to be an actual process of transforming our mind. And the first step is that we work with confusion, and then we actually see and understand what we mean with emptiness, and understand how, not understanding emptiness, sentient beings, they suffer. And we rouse then genuine compassion, caring. In the Vajrayana, we're recognizing that beyond even the notion of path, there is an abiding enlightenment that's right here, where confusion is not really a threat. But that requires really that we have had that process. Trungpa just says, the simultaneous experience of confusion and sanity, or being asleep and awake, is the realization of co-emergent wisdom. Any occurrence in one state of mind, any thought, feeling, or emotion, is both black and white. It is both a statement of confusion and a message of enlightened mind. Confusion is seen so clearly that this clarity itself is sacred outlook. Vajrayana is called the co-emergent mother. So co-emergent means that it's always been there. It emerged at the time of our confusion. So we talk about co-emergent ignorance, co-emergent wisdom. So we have this black of confusion, and we have the white of wisdom. And within this like Trungpa says, between samsara and nirvana, then nirvana has the upper hand. Within the vision of, or you could say, from the point of view of co-emergent wisdom, then even the presence of confusion doesn't really attain to anything except just being expression. It doesn't really attain any reality. It doesn't really constitute any threat or any power. It doesn't exert any power of us. So this is the experience of the co-emergent mother. Trungpa continues, in fact, sadhana of Vajrayana, according to Tilopa, is entitled the sadhana of the glorious co-emergent mother Vajrayana. By practicing the sadhana, by identifying ourselves with the body, speech, and mind of the yidam, we become able to experience the co-emergent boundary between confusion and wakefulness. Then we can use the confusion itself as a stepping stone for realizing further sanity and further wisdom. So here we're referring to the sadhana of Vajrayana, but of course this applies universally to sadhanas, whether it might be any of the deities of the three roots, Guru, Deva, Dakini, in the Kagyu, the Nyingma, the Sakya, or the Gelug tradition. All sadhanas operate with this yoga of the body, speech, and mind of the yidam. Okay. Visualization. Practitioners' connection to and understanding of the iconography come about through the visualization practice of Vajrayana. There are two stages of visualization practice: Utpatikrama, or Kirim in Tibetan, and Sampanakrama, Zorim in Tibetan, or Dharma language. Utpatikrama, literally meaning developing stage, and Sampanakrama meaning fulfillment stage. So these two, the developing and fulfillment stage. Utpatikrama is the process of visualizing the yidam, in this case Vajrayana. In the self-visualization, the practitioner visualizes him or herself as the yidam. The visualization arises from shunyata, or emptiness, as do all tantric visualizations. The text amplifies this concept. All the dharmas, comprising grasping and fixation, become empty. From within emptiness arises the triangular source of dharmas. On that is the nature of my consciousness. Just like a fish leaping from water, I arise in the body of Jetsun Vajrayana. So we have different ways of meditating on development stage practice, but all of them, they come from a place of confusion being seen for what it truly is, nothing but confused projection. That is the understanding of emptiness. And within that, then there's complete freedom. There's an understanding of emptiness. There's an understanding of what we call lack of emptiness of characteristics. There's lack of wishlessness. And this is what we call then the source of dharmas. This triangle that Vajrayana stands on symbolizes this what we call the Namta Gosam, the three doors of liberation, which are then emptiness, signlessness, and wishlessness. Phenomena don't possess any reality. They don't have any characteristics. They don't abide on the basis of any of our agendas or wishes. So within that nature of reality, then the nature of consciousness is the deity. And on the basis of the flashing or the cognitive spark, the presence, the spontaneous presence of us as the living, cognizing, experiencing individual, we have a complete sense of being alive. And here then, this life is no longer limited to just our karmic projection, but this is life free from the ordinary baggage or the ordinary obscuration. So that's where we arise in the form of Vajrayana. So like Trungpa says, so the process of visualizing oneself as the idam comes first from the experience of emptiness and egolessness. Out of that arises the source of Dharma, the abstract form of co-emergence. So that's emptiness possessing these three qualities. And on that, the practitioner visualizes himself as the idam. Let's see if we have that. Yeah. This tanga actually doesn't show the triangle, but you very often have you have on top of the sun disk, then you have this triangle. What's called the Dhammakara, the source of dharmas. Okay. Anyway, we'll start that next time. Okay. What is samaya and when on the path to engage with it? Samaya doesn't come until we really are at the place of wanting to begin Vajrayana practice. And so whenever we're if we look at the way Chögyam Trungpa would teach, then he would first have students study and practice for a number of years. First actually begin to have some sense of what the Buddhist teaching is about and understand what it means in terms of one's own experience. And then the students found that the Buddhist teaching really is something that is something that they would want to engage with fully, not just through studying the theory, but also through the experience that they would have gained through years of practicing sitting meditation. And that's where Trungpa was extremely skillful in terms of setting up a structure really in which there was no way that you couldn't not practice sitting meditation. And that also including practice like the Datuns, where people for an entire month actually would just do sitting practice. So at that point, there would really be, let's say, a very deep, visceral, experiential component of understanding what is being talked about. And then students would then would have to attend seminar, which is then where they would be exposed to a deeper sense of practice and deeper sense of the entire scope of the Buddhist path. Trungpa would take students through the foundations of Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana on a much deeper level. And also these seminars, initially they were, and for a number of years actually, I think for, I don't know, over 10 years, they were 3 months long. So it was a very sort of immersive process, really, seminar. And it's on then at the end of the seminar, then Trungpa would give people the Nundro transmission. Then people would be empowered to begin their Nundro practice. And then people would practice the Nundro. And then it's having completed the Nundro, then they would begin practice of Vajrayana. So typically after many years actually, or not many years, but after a very substantial process where the students would really clarify the nature of the path and how it suited them, then they would begin the Nundro practice. And then from there, eventually Vajrayana too. Is Samaya something we do within Nundro, or does it come after we complete it? In the Nundro, there are sometimes references to Samaya because again, Nundra is not something that we would just do once and then where it's done over and done with. We would do Nundra again and again. Many practitioners would do Nundra continually, even while they are doing the main Vajrayana practice. But when we're doing Nundra for the first time and before actually engaging with Vajrayana, then Samaya is not something that we particularly have at the level of doing the Nundra. So Samaya is something that comes much later with Vajrayana practice. Does the series of Abhisheka describe our path of realization and awakening? For example, in the third, non-duality dawns and subject-object dissolve, and we feel united with the world with great happiness. Then in the fourth Abhisheka, then even this sense of I, doing, doer, all dissolves. Yes, we could describe the Abhisheka in terms of these paths and these levels. Sometimes when we receive Abhisheka, we would say with the first Abhisheka, for example, you might receive you're essentially empowered up to the level of the eighth bhumi. Then from the further Abhishekas even higher. So they can be understood in terms of us being essentially anointed as having achieved all of these, from the point of view that the nature that we're empowering lies beyond the path. But nevertheless, there is still a sense of journey, of course, and so pregnant within the anointment ritual or our being empowered as deity is also the notion that we will, as part of the process of working with Vajrayogini or working with the Yidam deity, we will go through the experiences of the path. And that there's already we would say the Vajrayana is a little bit like the perspective from the top of the hill. So we understand and appreciate the value of all the paths that we can see from the vantage point of being on top of the hill of the mountain. We can see how all these paths, they are indispensable. So the various aspects of the Abhisheka also then describes the gradual path, but very much with an understanding that comes from the vantage point of the highest perspective. I took the Bodhisattva vow online with Sonsik and Rinpoche, but nothing was explained about Samaya. Well, that's because in the Bodhisattva vow there's not a notion of Samaya. In the Bodhisattva vow, then we receive the Bodhisattva vows. Is there a Samaya involved with taking the Bodhisattva vow? No. Bodhisattva vow is still very much the Bodhisattva vows, they're a different kettle, and this is very much within the Mahayana teachings. So that's why when we receive then the Bodhisattva vow, then we study the particular vows that pertain to the Bodhisattva vow. How do we keep the Bodhisattva vows in our everyday? How do we honor the Bodhisattva vows in everyday life and also a parent? Don't know how to repair something if I don't know how it's been broken. How ignorant of me. Well, it's not so much, these are not the things that we are taught ordinarily. So, I mean, this all requires that we actually look into it and study it. So, so there are teachings, of course, on the Bodhisattva vow. This is where it's very helpful actually to look at really the way of the Bodhisattva would give some idea about the Bodhisattva vow. So, essentially, the Bodhisattva vow, the heart of that really is kindness and compassion, and to engage in the path, such as practicing the Lojong teachings and so on. So studying the way of the Bodhisattva is very helpful. Studying the Lojong teachings is very helpful. The bottom line really being that we wish to cultivate the good heart really of the Bodhisattva. Do we take Samaya after the Nundra vow? Is this the typical path? We take the samaya together with receiving empowerment, abhisheka. So that's where the samaya fits in. It is the what we call the life force of the empowerment. The descriptions of samaya and abhisheka, does it apply to all empowerments of deities, and not just to Vajrayogini? For example, Amitabha, Chenrezig, Avatar. Pretty much yes. I was saying that before. So even though here we are describing Vajrayogini, we're also continually referring to Yidam as such. So yes, this to any really of the deities that we can think of. Sounds like the description of samaya, of body, speech, and mind, is the practice of trekchö. We rest within a purity kadag and see everything as a display of the mind, union with emptiness and clarity. Yeah, well, trekchö is the practice, is the Vajrayana beyond concepts. But we have to recognize we still operate with the concept of body, speech, and mind. We still operate with a keen sense of our physical embodiment, our relationship to a phenomenal world, and also, like we were talking about, all the occurrences in terms of our experiences and in terms of the what arises in the mind. So while in the abiding in the Dharmakaya, of course, which is the practice of trekchö, is beyond any kind of dualistic confusion. Then for us to actually engage this along with our ordinary perceptions, our general perceptions of our embodiment and being in the world and our relationship to our psychology and so on, it's very, very helpful to have the skillful means of the deity practice. So you'll see all Dzogchen practitioners also operate with the practice, the yoga of deity. Might you explain where dissolution and externalization of Vajrayogini in the Nundro fits in with co-emergent wisdom? Yeah, as we're explaining it here, we're more talking about the main practice. So this is post Nundro. There's some value in discussing where the Nundro leads us to an appreciation of the Vajrayana in general. So you could say, for us who are practicing Nundro, it's quite helpful to then have some idea of the path. And yet, within the Nundro, of course, there is references to Vajrayana, there is references to Vajrasattva, there's reference to Vajrayogini, and so forth. And whenever we have deity, it is the embodiment of our wisdom. So when we visualize Vajrayogini or Vajrasattva, that is visualizing this, you could say what is it, Trungpa calls it, the anthropomorphic, the embodiment of our wisdom. So that is the co-emergent wisdom. Co-emergent wisdom, the wave is seen and known to be also water. Correct? I guess so. Isn't Nundro already Vajrayana? Yes, Nundro is very much Vajrayana. It is the doorway of the Vajrayana house. So as long as we refer to the doorway as part of the house, which is it's an indispensable part of the house, it's definitely part of the Vajrayana. Yes, the live studio audience.
So practicing Vajrasattva and during the Nundro is the initial embodying deity because it's dissolving into you, and so is Guru Rinpoche within that practice. So it's sort of like preliminary in having being able to have the vision.
Yeah. Like the question before, how does Vajrayogini and the deities in the Nundro fit in? Yes, they are then the presence of the Vajrayana within the Nundro. Yeah. And so, but all aspects of the Nundro really are part of the Vajrayana. But there's never a time when we stop taking refuge or developing bodhicitta and so on. So all the different aspects of the Nundro, they are prerequisite to Vajrayana. And in fact, in Vajrayana sadhana, we always have what we call the preparation section, and then we have the main part and the conclusion, but the preparation section sometimes is a complete nundra in itself, with all the aspects of refuge, bodhicitta, vajrasattva, mandala, guru yoga, and so on. Based on what you read today, what is breaking samaya? Well, I would say at this point, I think it's more important for us to get some idea of what samaya is before we talk about breaking it, because very often what comes out of that discussion is sort of an unfortunate culture of then looking at being worried about breaking it. So I would say for the time being, like someone was quoting, if it ain't broken, no need to fix it, in the sense that we're not really at Vajrayana until we really are Vajrayana practitioners. Then the details of breaking it is really not relevant for us. Of course, breaking samaya is like breaking the vows. So it's like any time that we begin something and we don't complete it, there's a breakage. So breaking samaya really is that once we are on the path, that we simply that we keep up discipline of that particular path. Is the previous subheading geo-emergent, not co-emergent? Geo-emergent, not co-emergent. If it said geo-emergent, that would have been a typo, yeah. I think, yeah, I didn't see any geo-emergent. Did I miss something? No, I don't think there's any geo-emergent. Might be a typo somewhere. Is it possible through practice to rekindle an abhisheka received many years prior? I'm thinking of a Chinrezi empowerment I received from His Holiness Dalai Lama, which I never really followed up on. Well, in some traditions, we would say that unless we uphold this every day, then it's broken. In other traditions, we would say as long as we sustain the essence, which is then the general practice that we're doing, as long as we do that, then the empowerment is upheld, particularly with reference to, say, Guru Yoga. But I've myself received empowerment from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chinrezi, and His Holiness would actually say that the commitment is upholding bodhicitta. So if you've been on the Mahayana path, then consider that your Chinrezi empowerment is still intact. When visualizing Yidam in our daily life, do we visualize the Guru in front of us at the same time? Sometimes in the sadhana there will be visualizing the Guru, but otherwise we would just consider really the Guru as inseparable from the Yidam. Yeah. So with the Yidam practice, we are engaging the presence of the Guru. So as we advance on the path, at some point we will practice Nundra, deity, and Treksha simultaneously, I suppose. Yeah, we won't really see any difference between these. That's interesting, but this is the point. The more you practice something like the Great Perfection, the more you actually are also practicing all the other aspects of the entire Buddhist path. So you see the unity of all of these. Again, coming back to the image of the being at the mountaintop. So all of the different aspects of the path become, their relevance becomes increasingly clearer to us. So Nundra is Vajrayana, but does not involve Samaya. Is that right? Yes, that's correct. Yes. In itself, then Nundra doesn't come with Samaya. With the sexual scandals these days with some gurus, does this happen in the context of Yidam practice? Huh? Cannot be during Treksha or Nundra practice. That question I don't understand. With the sexual scandals these days with some gurus, does this happen in the context? We would say that sexual scandals is not really the path. If somebody doesn't, sexual scandal would imply that there's some wrongdoing. Also, what we have sometimes is, this I have to say, without in any way endorsing, you could say, self-centered, egotistic practice. Sometimes some of these, the differences in culture, there's cultural practices that differ from culture and even from different times. So there's things that are acceptable in one culture that are not acceptable in another. And there's also things that are acceptable in one decade that are not acceptable in another decade. So that's a discussion unto itself. But that has nothing really to do with the path. Yeah, co-emergent wisdom. So what was it again? There was reference to, there was a question about, I'm going back to the geo-emergent. Is the previous subheading not co-emergent? Yeah, we're talking about co-emergent wisdom, yeah. I've read that we are not to follow teachers who have broken samaya as then I've read that we are not to follow teachers who have broken samaya as then the lineage back to the Buddha isn't intact. Is this why it's so important to study teachers very closely and also the lineage they represent? I guess so, yes. Yeah, it's basic to the entire path, really, is that we have the Dharma of transmission, which are all the teachings, but then we have the Dharma of realization. And these are all the great individuals who, down through the times, have realized, gained realization. And so it's such teachers then that hold the lineage, not those who don't have realization, those who have broken the lineage. So we need to study very closely teachers and make sure that they are authentic teachers. What excuse is the guru using to have sex with students, or is it devotion? No, there's somebody who has sex with students from a self-centered place is definitely not a guru. If there is a guru, we would see this person as not being someone who is subject to the ordinary desires. So we would never ever call somebody who engages in ordinary sex as a guru. So simply that's we're talking about persons who are not qualified to be, you could say, teaching the path. Then again, we do have sometimes the activities of some teachers which defy ordinary conventional logic, of course. So that's where before we engage with the guru, we'd make sure that they're not ordinary persons posing as teachers, but that they are genuine gurus. But at that point, then we would have pure perception with whatever such a teacher sees, and that we would never ever see them, their actions, whatever they might do, as being ordinary. So that's again where the Vajrayana is very different in its you could say view from the ordinary path, and that's why engaging in the Vajrayana, and particularly then having a Vajrayana teacher, really requires that there is engagement of complete confidence in Buddha nature, and also then having the recognition that the teacher is someone embodying this enlightened quality. So again, coming back to really the heart of this is that the guru who grants empowerment should never be an ordinary person. This would only be somebody who truly is enlightened, and everything that they do then is seen as being enlightened activity, is something that extends to others, benefiting sentient beings, and however it might play out. Okay. All right, we've gone a little bit over time. So let's just see here. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.